I'm the bad guy?
Yeah.
How did that happen? I did everything they told me to. Did you know I build missiles?
Yeah.
I helped to protect America? You should be rewarded for that. Instead, they give it to the plastic surgeon. You know, they lied to me.
Is that what this is about? You're angry because you got lied to? Hey, they lie to everybody. They lie to the fish. But that doesn't give you any special right to do what you did today.
Welcome to Two Movies Enter, One Movie Leaves. On this week's show, it's going to be the battle of, I suppose, people going into fucking psychotic states and becoming vigilantes.
Yeah, the antihero.
The antihero. Well, yeah, well, I don't know what other way to do, but it's movies with people's descent into madness from their point of view. So it's Falling Down versus Taxi Driver, or Taxi Driver versus Falling Down. I suppose the dog is just, if you can hear the little click clack, and that's the dog walking around there. He's got some serious opinions that you probably want to stay tuned to listen to. But yeah, on this week's show, we're going to be going through the scoreboard on it and see which one is comes out on top. And as well, we're going to be throwing in our own little bits of analysis of both movies.
And our own descent into madness.
And our own descent into madness, yes. Our own Cthulhu-like descent into madness. So I suppose we start off with Taxi Driver. If you want to do the plot summaries.
Jesus, I don't know about the plot summary for this. Basically, sort of a veteran, not a veterinarian, a veteran basically is trying to occupy his time. Clearly has a bit of PTSD. He wants to drive taxi so he can be working all the time. And he kind of more or less sees himself as like the hero, I suppose. He sees injustices and he wants to right the wrongs. He's, sort of, he becomes obsessed with a woman. He's, oh God, I need to kill this future candidate for the presidency. There's a lot to unpack, really, I suppose, in there. Yeah,
it really, I think the similarities, both films have similarities to Joker, Todd Phillips' Joker. What does the dog have now?
A toothbrush.
His own toothbrush.
Not ours.
Yeah. But it's the whole thing with Taxi Driver as well. I suppose, I don't know, I didn't really, I meant to read up a lot more on it then, but it's such an iconic movie. People have loads of different, but we were only saying it when we were looking at it. This is your first time seeing Taxi Driver as well.
Yes, my first time seeing it the whole way through, which is ridiculous given I went to school for film and it was on our syllabus and I just somehow managed to not watch it or not do anything about it.
But I think when there are certain things that you're meant to do when it's like an academic thing, you kind of avoid it, whereas like I was the same, kind of like there was loads of books that I would have read before I went to college on certain topic, and then kind of when I was in there it was like, it's the fucking last thing I ever wanted, and afterwards it was the last thing I ever wanted to read. But yeah, it's critically acclaimed. It's probably been put down as one of the best movies of all time.
Scorsese, De Niro, of course.
Yeah, and it is.
Pairing.
Yeah, it is. I think it's very similar in points to Driller Killer. I think Driller Killer would have came after it, I suppose. Well, people who aren't familiar with Driller Killer, it's Abe Ferreira's version of a guy. It's the whole thing. It became known for the video nasty thing in the 80s, but it was really because of the cover, which had a guy's head getting a drill into it with ketchup coming out. But that was like dealing, I can't remember the main character's name, but he's sent into a similar type of madness from the neighbours. It was a punk band or a hardcore band, I think, and they were playing music the whole time, and that was driving them insane. And it was just New York was seen as violent fucking cesspool in the 70s and the early 80s. And then of course Rudy Giuliani came along and cleaned it all up. Yeah.
Stop crime.
Yeah, stop crime completely. Yeah.
Except for his own.
Yeah, so that's Taxi Driver. Falling Down, it's set in LA as opposed to New York. It follows Michael Douglas's character, Defense, or Bill. And it starts off for kind of, I suppose, it's from his point of view as well for part of the film, but they break it up by following a detective
and his ex-wife.
Yeah. So when it starts off, I think you can kind of nearly sympathise with him, or he's in the heat, but it's basically his journey into a different form of madness, where he keeps saying he's just trying to get home and certain things befall him as he's going along.
Yeah, it's like he's having the worst day ever.
Yeah, and at first you kind of think, oh, well, maybe he's overreact. You know, there might be a bit of like a violent reaction to some of these things, but it's nearly like that I'm so angry I can scream fucking thing, or I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. But then as it goes on, you kind of start realising, no, this guy is fucking mad.
Yeah.
Now, when it came out at first, I think it was touted as being racist. That it was promoting racism. It's not. Like, even Michael Douglas's character in it isn't racist. It's just he's in LA and it's mixed race. But we'll get into that later on. But it's about his journey home, and he's getting into ever increasingly violent
scenarios,
escapades.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's like, I think Robert Duvall, he picks up on it. He's a detective who's it's his last day and he's retiring, and he kind of picks up on that there's something wrong about this guy. He keeps hearing different stories and he's piecing the stories together. And he's, even though he's seen as like not really a cop, he's like a desk jockey.
Yeah, because he didn't want, he got injured out in the field or something, wasn't it? And he was too nervous to go back out again. So they're all kind of like treating him almost as a coward, which is ridiculous.
And it's, as he says later on, it was because his wife, she started losing her mind after that happened too. And he came home one day and she thought that he was dead and it was his ghost, and he had to chase around the house with it. But as he says near the end, it's like, oh yeah, guys like you never think that you're going to be kind of like doing this. And he said then all of a sudden you're kind of like, you're after killing your wife and kid and you turn the gun on yourself. With it. And even he's like, since when did I become the bad guy? Or he's like, am I the bad guy? And this is the thing, I worked in forensics for a while, and this is the thing with a lot of people, like, no one thinks that they're bad. Some people do. Say someone like Richard Ramirez thinks that they're bad. They get a kick out of being evil. Fucking a lot of really evil people, like Hitler, say, for one. Hitler did not think he was...
Is this a defence of Hitler?
No, but like, bad guys do not think that they're bad guys.
Of course.
It's their actions make them bad guys, but in their own head, they're doing right.
And in their own head as well, there's justification for their actions as well.
And this is the thing that connects the two films, I think, really well, is that Travis Bickle thinks he's doing right. And even though he's taken law into his... But it could have easily went the other way, as we'll talk about later on. And with Michael Douglas's character as well, he thinks he's the victim in his head, whereas he's actually the
he's
fucking
the one
perpetrator.
perpetrating the violence, I suppose.
With it, and he is like that. Whereas it's kind of like, I suppose it just cover with it, because at the time there was a lot of stuff about falling down, saying that it was racist and stuff. My argument against it is that he feels that there's a black guy he sees, like, that's basically wearing the same clothes as him, protesting outside a bank because he couldn't get a loan, saying they told me that I was economically unviable. And Michael Douglas associates with him. And as well, he meets a black kid. He's really nice to the black kid. He meets, like, their Hispanic family, I think, and he's nice, you know. So he's not...
Yeah, I see. I suppose I could see it from, okay, right, fair enough, with the gang that he kind of comes into contact with. They are the aggressors first. They start off first. I suppose the only thing you could say is the Vietnamese store owner. That was a bit, sort of, you're coming to my country, you need to learn my language.
I forgot about that. Yeah. Jeez, I forgot about that.
So there's that bit of a sort of...
Totally forgot that, actually. Sorry,
Yeah, but I could see why people are going, my God, that's...
Yeah, so he was racist. yeah, sorry, forget about that. I completely and utterly fucking forgot about that, because there's so much else happens in the movie. But yeah, so he is, I think it's, what you're seeing a lot of that stuff, kind of stuff rising up in people, definitely in Ireland you're seeing, I think in a lot of parts of the world, this weird nationalism from people who wouldn't consider themselves racist, but they're actually fucking massive racists.
And I suppose, again, in the whole in the context of the film, he feels he is justified in it, because he goes in and he literally, all he wants to do is to change $1 so he can call his wife. Obviously in the days for his cell phone you needed to go to a phone booth. And the man is like, no, you need to buy something first. And he's like, fine, I'll buy this. And he's like, okay, that'll be 85 cents. And he's like, but if I buy it, I won't have enough left for the phone. And your man is like, tough shit, like, basically.
Yeah, it's like, he can't set the and he's like, oh yeah, give me the Coke for 50 cents. And he's like, why would I? Like, you know? But as well, it's the whole thing about, so say Michael Douglas's character might be racist in it, but the film is not endorsing racism.
Yes.
And because, like, Michael Douglas is the bad guy. Like, the thing is, it was so fucked up at the time, probably, in the world. And I think it was shot during the LA riots, the time with Rodney King. And there was a lot of mad shit going on in the 90s with stuff that I think, you know, maybe certain people might have hijacked him as a character.
Well, you see, again, I suppose, like, I mean, I would have watched that sort of, what year was that out? I would have been a kid at that stage.
Yeah, we would have
anyway.
been very young when it
But
came
like,
out.
I can remember completely
93,
sympathising.
yeah.
So I would have been maybe, 12, 13, 14, thereabouts. And I can remember totally sympathising with him because I was like, yeah, fucking cotton traffic, fucking stuck, you know.
But that's the
all
thing,
of that
when you're
kind of
young,
stuff,
you
yeah.
focus on that, or the bit in the burger store.
Yeah,
that's
that's
what
what
I
everyone, yeah,
and
is.
it's kind of funny, and you kind of, yeah, because you never get your burger looking the way it's meant to be.
Yeah,
or,
they promise you all this and then you get fucking fobbed off with this bullshit sort of shitty burger.
But on the whole racism thing as well, Travis Bickle is definitely racist. That's the whole thing as well that it's from. He's because, like, he even refers to African Americans as spooks. That's he's now. I remember looking at it. I didn't understand what he meant by spooks. I thought that he meant just like weirdos out in the nighttime, you know. And then it was like, because like obviously, I suppose racial fucking what's it? Not racial language. I suppose fucking derogatory terms change over time.
And
Or
as
maybe
well-
that's it is. I don't know.
But the thing is, that wouldn't have been an insult that we would have heard at all in Ireland.
No,
it just
Jesus
wasn't
Christ,
known
no.
like,
yeah. Because it wouldn't have. I don't. And there were. I suppose it's the same. I won't start naming out fucking loads. It sounds like Dirty Harry.
Oh my god! Yeah, just start naming off a load of slurs.
Yeah, I was
No
like,
thanks.
I never heard of this.
No, you're grand, thanks.
But with Travis Bickle, he's like at this. It shows him in coffee shops and stuff, and he's looking. He seems to blame people of a certain race for all the crime and all that, and it's very subtle because he never actually says anything like that throughout it.
And yet, I suppose his main target in it is
They're white guys, they're white guys that are committing the most heinous crimes,
and they're sort of at opposite ends of the spectrum. You have this like candidate running for the presidential race, and then at the other end you have this like pimp who's pimping out like young girls and stuff.
Yeah.
So you have sort of, at the very top level of society, and then again at the very bottom level of society.
But I think that was probably intended to show that, look, this is the way that these guys' minds work. They're fucking blaming the wrong people for like society's ills, where these are the people that are to blame for society's ills, because that's the way racist minds work, isn't it? It's like blaming the other, that they don't want to blame the mirror fucking image kind of a thing, But I suppose that's the plots. So I suppose if we're going to say starting off with the scoring, with the plot for Taxi Driver and Falling Down, the story arcs and the plausibility, I think they're both fairly plausible. Definitely fucking the stuff like Falling Down probably happens fucking an awful lot more.
That's
now,
sure. I mean, you have the whole like that horrible term going postal where people just have too many bad days and fucking snap. And that's
road
it.
rage. Road rage wasn't a thing up until fucking 20 years ago. Maybe you never heard. Like I'm sure people experienced, but you never heard of people getting shot or kind of like brutally beaten and stuff from people. And there's if anyone's a fan of 2000 AD or Judge Dredd, there used to be a thing in 2000 AD with Judge Dredd called when people get to a point where they just snap and they start doing fucking mad shit or they start killing people around. It was like future shock. It was always really, it was like, oh, they just can't handle living in the future. And it's like, but isn't it the present?
You're trying to acclimatise to it. Yeah.
But that's pretty much what Falling Down is, that he just... Like, he's after losing his job, but you learn as it goes on from the point of view of the ex-wife, there was always something off with him. And then when they meet his mother, you kind of see that the mother has mental health issues, which he probably inherited from her. There was something going on. She was like, I've always worried about him, I've always been scared of him.
Yeah.
So he was just a ticking time bomb waiting to go off, and this is the falling down.
The proper day that he explodes.
And things just fall into place in his favour, nearly getting all the guns and all the different things, whereas in Taxi Driver it's more of a slow build. It's more of a, and they don't really, they just kind of, this is I think the brilliance of Taxi Driver at the start of it. They don't kind of have a load of things where he's like having flashbacks in his car driving along and like, oh god, Nam, he just says that he was in Vietnam, he was a Marine. When he's going for an interview, he can't sleep. And that's it. Now, at the time, I don't know how people were up on PTSD. I think PTSD is a relatively new, as in the last 25, 30 years.
Maybe a post-Iraq or something like that.
Yeah, like obviously it's always been a thing, but kind of like just as diagnosing, whereas with that's enough where you kind of go, oh yeah, he's quite obviously, and he can't sleep and he's fucking reliving all these things and he's having bad thoughts.
Busy,
And it's just his descent through PTSD and loneliness informing this weird fucking world where he's quite obviously got a moral structure that he's after, probably based on coming from a small town with it. So in his eyes, he thinks of himself as being pure, like even when he's driving along, he's like, oh fucking, wish a rain had come and washed the scum off the streets. And as well with that, the presidential candidate, he's like, oh, maybe you can clean up this town, it's fucking
full of scum, full of dirt.
So I don't know, it's hard with this stuff because the plots, I think they're nearly similar story arc but done differently. That's that's the thing. Falling Down happens all in the space of like an afternoon, basically, one full day, whereas Taxi Driver is over multiple weeks and multiple months. Like, do you know what I mean? It's not just like, oh, there's one night and all the rest. And I think that kind of, you see the sort of the slow descent and the monotony and the repetition of his life, where he's like, he's hanging out with these other taxi driver co-workers, but he's totally zoned out and he's not on this. You can kind of see. It gives a very deep painting of the character, I suppose. Yeah, it does. It's a character study. Both of them are character studies, but it's just different directors. It's Scorsese and never said Joel Schumacher directed it for most famous for Batman and Robin. And The Lost Boys. Yeah. But it's like we'll get into the directing and stuff like that. So who would you give the point to then for the plot?
I don't know. The Taxi Driver is probably more complex, I suppose, really. Falling Down, if you want to go for sort of plausibility and story arc as well, you could easily see that happen. Somebody with propensity to violence or mental illness and all the rest, and just the one bad day. Because that's something I think everyone says, like, everyone is just one bad day away from,
It's the Killing Joke.
Yeah, there you go. So I don't know. I'm torn between the two. Like, as I said, Taxi Driver is a much more of a slow burn. I'm going to take the opposite view. I'm going to go with Falling Down.
Yeah, so would I actually. I think it's Falling Down, I think, as well, because it comes from multiple angles, and as well the way it portrays nearly not as the hero, but where you can kind of nearly sympathise with him at certain points. And then as it goes on, you see more and more, it's like, this guy is fucking really unhinged, but it's hidden well.
Whereas Taxi Driver, straight away you see him, he's going to like porno theatres and all this, and he tries bringing a date there, and it's just like, oh my God.
And he doesn't really understand, even when he's talking to the guy at the end, he doesn't understand. You can kind of see there's stuff kind of gone there already. So you kind of have an idea that it's not going to,
wrong. Exactly. Yeah.
Whereas like there's moments in Falling Down, it's like you do get to the point with him that there's bits even after he does certain things, like when he goes into the fucking store with the racist guy in there, and it's like it's a mirror being held up to him, and he's like, I'm not like you, I'm not, and he's like, we're the same, you and I, and he's like, but the Cyclone B and all that shit, and he's the first guy that he actually kills, whereas with the other people, so it escalates to that point where he's just. So he's got like a skew. He doesn't realise that.
Hey, now, was he the first guy you killed? Did you shoot the gang members first?
He shot the gang member in the leg. Sure. Yeah, the gang members ended up killing themselves by crashing into a thing. So it was like he just he avoided being shot by luck. Yeah, really,
that's it. And it was their own fault really for chasing after and being so violent and trying to drive by shooting.
Yeah. But none of these, it's like some of these things could have been avoided. Some of these things, like they're obviously a violent gang, so that's where it's done well. I think where you're kind of like, oh yeah, well maybe they got what they deserved, and he's going to be the hero in it. But then as it goes on, where he's like killing the Nazi guy. But at the same point, it could be fucking anyone. Yeah. Like, you only kind of get to that point later on, and it's like, you could bump into him, and he could fucking put a bullet in your head just
take
because.
Take a dislike to for some random reason.
Because some of the shit that he comes out with, it's, especially when he's in the burger joint, and all that. So, yeah, I'd give it to Falling Down as well. Yeah. So, on to the next one, with entertainment value and rewatchability.
Well, I mean, strictly entertainment value, it's probably Falling Down. Like Taxi Driver, as I said, is more of a character study, so you have to be kind of in the humour for it, and it's a very, it's a quiet and unsettling kind of journey that you go on, whereas with Falling Down, it's rampant, it's straight from the get-go. It's like it opens on the traffic jam that sends him in the spiral in the first place,
It's an entertaining movie. Like, I mean, Taxi Driver... it's not meant to be entertaining. I don't think you're ever going on, woohoo, like, he's with a 12-and-a-half-year-old who wants to suck his dick, like, where it is, it's more grimy. I think it shows probably that
it's probably more uncomfortable as well.
Yeah.
As I said, like Falling Down, I think everyone can possibly relate a little bit, I suppose. Whereas I think Taxi Driver is very much it's like walking through someone else's madness, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's like it's
very dreamlike.
Yeah.
As well, like there is and even with the music, it's the same music the whole way through it, and it just. It's hypnotic.
Yeah.
I think you said it well with the whole thing about replaying nearly the same, like, monotonous fucking
the same day over and over
again. But yeah, Falling Down, I think, is way more entertaining. And I'd rewatch Falling Down in a heartbeat. Whereas with Taxi Driver,
You'd have to give it a while and go back to it again once you'd sort of...
Like, I like it. Yeah. I think it's aged incredibly well.
Oh, God, yeah.
But at the same point, when you compare it to, quite obviously, like, if there was something wrong with it, it didn't. But like the Scorsese's later work, like you can kind of see it with this. This is where he's, I think, getting there with stuff.
Well, we'll be talking about it later on, I suppose. But like the cinematography in that is fucking fantastic.
Yeah, but say compared to something like Goodfellas, whereas I think by the time he hits Goodfellas and all that, he understands how to use the soundtrack. He understands how to use everything. As well, the 70s was different. Things were.
A bit more experimental as well, I think,
Yeah, and as well, like, Joel Schumacher, I don't think gets enough fucking credit with stuff.
That's it, I know, like, you hear Joel Schumacher and you kind of think, popcorn throwaway film kind of thing, a lot of the time, and this definitely wasn't a popcorn throwaway film. There's a commentary on society.
But even, like, Lost Boys, there was a commentary, it's Batman and Robin.
Commentary on, Bat nipples.
Ice to see you. Chill.
Yeah.
But I just thought Falling Down gets the point with that. It's probably going to say a lot about us as well by the end of this, where it's Falling Down probably have 10
totally
points.
Identify with this dude.
Yeah. No, but as well, kind of the type of films that we're in as well, because it's I didn't want to get into saying that, like, Taxi Driver was boring and stuff, but
well, I suppose if you were to look at it, if you're looking at it from, I suppose, a detached view, it's more of an Oscar-worthy film, whereas Falling Down, it should get the same accolades, but it's just that bit more bombastic, I think, or a bit more modern or something.
I think just reading around or looking at it, it wasn't received well at all when it came out. But say on to the next subject, theme. They both have the same themes, really.
Kind of, yeah, I suppose. Yeah. That's the thing. I mean, they both have family that love him that they've fallen out of contact with, because you have the whole trope of he's reading the letters home to his parents, Taxi Driver.
And he's like, "Do not worry about me. I will show up at your door."
I'm doing very important work for the government, and defence is the same. He was like working for, defence, military complex and all the rest.
There's even that point, and it was a bit of a joke in the 80s and the 90s, I think, about people. There was actually a guy I was working with at one stage. This was in a fucking factory. He used to go in. I remember seeing him the first few times and thought that he was a manager or something. He'd go in like a suit and a tie.
And a briefcase,
And a briefcase. And then he'd sit down at the factory line and just
be a line operative. And like, not saying nothing about line operatives or anything like that, but the general kind of wear for that would be like something comfortable, like a tracksuit and a t-shirt or something,
But he'd have his lunch in his briefcase, and that's the whole thing with defence, that he's, after losing his job, and for the last month he's been... And then you kind of go, why was he sitting in traffic?
Yeah.
Like this
and who was he saying that he was going to work as well, because he's after moving out of his ex-wife's home. Yeah. His mother hadn't seen him. Who the fuck was like he trying to convince that?
And then why did he lose it? Something must have happened at the job. But apart from all that stuff, the bit where there's a guy who's in the park who's like, you don't know whether he's a junkie or he's a homeless guy or what, and he's like, oh, give me your briefcase. You got 2 briefcases, give me one of your bags. And he gives him the briefcase, and then when he opens it up, it's just a sandwich and an apple in there. Nothing, It's
just carrying around his lunch, it's just all, I suppose, image and outer appearance and stuff,
Yeah.
Again, it's like, I mean, you look at defence and he's sort of the ultimate kind of upright, button down, stand up citizen. He's got his short back and sides. He's kind of his buzz cut hair top, his white shirt, his tie, his briefcase. He's just got this cultivated image of like, I am the American dream as such, like I am the American worker,
Yeah, blue collar.
Yeah. Well, I suppose, white collar.
Or white collar, yeah. What's blue collar?
Blue collar is trades, basically.
All right.
Yes.
See, because I don't see kind of, I'm not a classist like you.
Yes.
But yeah, it's hard because the teams are so similar with it. So say what we have written beside the team is identity and depth. So I suppose if we focus on the depth to see who we're going to give.
I think Taxi Driver probably has to win it.
Yeah, it
goes into a lot. Is a lot more of a deep dive, I suppose. You know.
But still, how much do you learn about Travis Bickle in it?
Well, it's all kind of peeled back very gradually through, say, his narration of the letters to his parents, all of that kind of stuff, through what he says to, he's trying to impress like Sybil Shepherd, as the girl that he fixates on.
But even, is it like a thing with Travis Bickle that he's nearly like Patrick Bateman, that he is a psychopath from the start anyway? Because you look at his apartment and it's all bare bones and stripped in. He's got his TV and that's it. But he doesn't or at least he doesn't. At least Patrick Bateman liked music and he was renting movies.
Yeah.
Like, he just goes into porno movies and he doesn't see that there's any difference in it. When he brings Sybil Shepherd to it, he doesn't see that he's after, and he's like apologising, saying, "Oh, I didn't know. I don't know the difference between movies and stuff."
Yeah.
So it's like, can he just not read people's intentions?
That's it. Sort of very socially inept and just not able, to kind of relate to normal people in normal society, I suppose.
Like, he gets angry. He gets angry and he sees that what's going on with Jodie Foster's girl, but he's stalking her at one. It's only when he finds out that she's 12 then he's like, "Oh, what the fuck?" Like, but he was following her. So he had, I think so. He is a creep. Like, he's an utter creep.
Yes, well, that's the thing he doesn't actually realise it. Whereas I suppose again, with defense, I suppose, or Bill, like, I mean, you do feel sorry for him, because even when, it's very uncomfortable. The ex-wife calls basically cops just around because she has a restraining order against him, and she's explaining, and the cop is kind of like, "Well, was he violent, yeah?" And she's like, "Well, no." And he's like, "Well, did he ever hit you?" "Well, no." He's like, "But I felt like he kind of could." And your man was like, okay. Now, initially I was kind of going, Jesus, questioning, sort of this woman who's in a horrible situation, but then it's kind of like, okay, maybe there is something to question there. Did she just suddenly decide, "No, fuck you," and then she takes the house and she takes the child and she ruins his life?
And it's only near the end when he goes into the house and he puts it on a home video of them, and it starts off kind of just like, "Oh, they're out having a nice day," and then he starts getting really aggressive with the wife, and the kid is crying and he's like, where you kind of go, "Oh yeah, he's..."
There was something, there was that bubbling anger underneath kind of thing. But that's what kind of makes you question the whole way through. It's like, what led him to that stage,
Yeah.
But again, that reflects back on you. It's like, well, okay. It's like you always question, like, what did she do to make him hit her? Kind of, that kind of a thing.
I think it was a brilliant casting with Michael Douglas as well. I think he took a reduction in his fee to get the film made because people didn't really want to make it. And it's like Michael Douglas at the time would have been hot shit, and like, you had Romance in the Stone.
Yeah, it would have been another Tom Cruise.
Yeah, and sure, he's Kirk Douglas's son, so there was that whole thing there as well. So he always played nearly, well, apart from Gordon Gekko, I suppose, but
he was always the hero, exactly. Yeah.
So then you have, where it's easy to kind of go. It'd be like, I suppose, if The Rock did something like this now.
I wouldn't necessarily pick The Rock.
Well, maybe not, but but
Tom Hanks.
Yeah, well, there could be a lot of stuff might come out about Tom Hanks.
We can't pick anybody that's wholesome nowadays, eh? Keanu Reeves.
Yeah, well, John Wick. That was like documentary, that was. But I suppose it gets more in depth in Taxi Driver at the point where it is. I think of Taxi Driver is probably similar to fucking American Psycho a bit, actually. Just he's not after stepping over into that kind of point, because like the whole thing with Travis Bickle, I think, is that although it was a heroic, or seen as a heroic thing that he did at the end, it wasn't really. It was he fucking wanted to kill people. Like, he was going to kill, if he had to kill the president thing beforehand, or the guy that was running for president, then it would have been different. So it would have been like, oh, fucking
this psychopath is after going off the rails, basically. And he was after doing the whole, like, that was when I suppose his whole appearance changed up as well. He kind of shaved the head into the mohawk and put back on the army jacket and all the rest. Looked like your typical sort of like, shooter from the 70s, I suppose, really.
Yeah, and then at the end of the movie, because there was a lot of debate about the end of the movie, whether it was a dream, did he die, and stuff. And I think over the years, Scorsese and other people around basically came out and said, no, it wasn't a dream. It was meant to show that, all right, look, he's still around, but he's not cured. He's he's still unhinged, and he's going to do stuff. Like, it could be anyone, because he's driving along, and I suppose he's after getting recognition for what he's.
Everyone is thinking of him as a hero.
And he's like, oh, now no matter what I do, I should be doing this more often. Where it's nearly like a Charles Bronson thing in Death Wish, but realistic. You know, whereas Charles Bronson was like killing muggers and stuff.
Yeah, he was like killing pimps.
But like Travis Bickle could just decide that someone is a villain and just fucking
Just for the sake of it. Like, I mean, you look at, again, going back to Sybil Shepherd's character, she had a male co-worker and he just like really didn't like him.
He said this straight, I don't like you or him,
So it could be just as innocent as like, you know, being friends with the wrong person kind of a thing that he fixates on. So yeah. But anyway, team identity.
So I suppose Taxi Driver.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like it's very close. We'll say what about like really I suppose Taxi Driver.
Yeah, you can't really. Yeah.
Now acting, characters and performance. This is fucking very close as well.
Well, I suppose Robert De Niro with his whole method thing, like there's a few shots in that film where like he was gone fucking super sinewy and skinny and muscly and all the rest, and you know he was doing the thing where he's holding his arm over the heat, all of that kind of stuff, and it was just they were actually kind of almost shocking kind of cuts. You kind of, you know, you see this guy and he looks relatively mild-mannered because he just, you know, he's got a normal dude haircut and he's just hanging out, and then you go home and he's just like fucking, this guy is working out and he's like turning himself into this weird fucking beast or something like that, you know. But Robert De Niro does seem to sink very deep into the whole method.
He does, but I think at the same point with Michael Douglas's thing, because it was so different from the way that he normally plays things, and he added that bit of humanity or likability to someone who was like fairly repulsive human being, like at the centre of it.
But I suppose as well, like, I mean, you look at the cast of supporting characters. You've got Robert Duvall.
Robert Duvall is excellent.
He's fantastic. The ex-wife is good, you know, and Robert Duvall's wife is good. Everyone who was at the precinct, they're very believable, fleshed out characters. Whereas, I mean, okay, you go back to Taxi Driver, you have Sybil Shepherd is a bit...
She's Sybil Shepherd.
Yeah, but I found it very unbelievable because she was creeped out by him looking at her at first, and then she was like, I'll go out with you, and then she's repulsed by him again. And
not only did they go out for the thing, they end up dating and stuff, and at the end of it, when she sees that he's
after rescuing him,
she kind of goes and looks for him to meet, where you kind of get the feeling that she's like interested in him again. But that could be just, you know, could be like a star fucker or kind of, you know, for lack of a better word for it.
Like Jodie Foster is brilliant, obviously. You know what I mean?
And that's why she was 12. Like
I know, so young. Like, Jesus, that's kind of terrifying when you think back on it. But Harvey Keitel.
Oh
my God! As the pimp with the long hair, and he's just standing dancing.
I think Harvey Keitel is like way overrated with things. Like, he's a good actor and stuff, but. He's just fucking Harvey Keitel.
Well, that's it. Like, I mean, I was like, Jesus, Harvey Keitel is the pimp, and they've got a long-haired wig on him. What the fuck? Like, you know, it kind of took me out of it.
And he's just, hey, buddy, and he's just Harvey Keitel. You know, I don't.
Whereas I think the whole cast of Fallen Down, I think, were quite believable.
But even like the guy who plays the Nazi and the Nazi store owner, he's very fucking believable. Like, he's. And like, I mean, I guarantee you, you meet an awful lot more people like him nowadays than fucking back then.
But like, every single character is fleshed out. I mean, like, you have the gangbangers or whatever, they had the girlfriend that was in the car. And then, like, when you go back and you see when she's at the police station, she's got her mother with her and she's just a scared young girl. They
flesh out the characters
a lot so more. She's not just like your typical sort of gangbanger girlfriend or anything like that. She's the one that's trying to slow the roll and stop things, and she's terrified, and, you know, you kind of get caught up. So it actually fleshes out everybody. The Vietnamese guy, he pops up 2 or 3 times as well.
He does, Mr. Kim, I think, wasn't it? And I didn't know that guy from so many other films, but I can't. He's just one of those... You know, there was a film actually about actors like that where it's like, the guy from the thing,
you know the face. And even the fast food restaurant workers as well. They were given
Michelle Pfeiffer's sister.
Yeah, but I mean, they were given their own kind of, and you knew who they were. You knew who the smarmy manager was. You knew who the girl was who was just working there and didn't give a shit. You know, you knew who even the sort of the diners in the restaurant. You could see the relationships. You know, where the little kid raises his hand and he's like, you know, I give the answer to the question. The father's like, Jesus Christ, don't fucking draw him on.
I think the acting is far better, say, overall in Falling Down, because there's not many other characters really in fucking taxi driver.
And they all seem very ephemeral as well. It's kind of like he does have the bunch of other taxi drivers he hangs out with, but they just kind of drift in and out, and I suppose that's to add to the whole unreality of it all, that he's sort of living in his own world and he's not connecting with anyone.
Even with their kind of like acting performance, some of them I think are a bit stilted and
maybe a bit hammy or something like that. They're a bit stage acty.
So I think with Taxi Driver, like, I mean, it's carried by Robert De Niro, whereas with Falling Down, I think it's a cast of characters and a cast cast of good actors as well. Like Robert Duvall is, because there's points with Robert Duvall where you kind of go, is he fucking stupid or is he fucking like mental? And so because he just carries this, it's nearly like he's constantly saying Serenity now, Serenity now.
Yeah.
And there's people mocking him and he's like, laughing away about it. And it's like he thinks he's one of the guys, but he's
Yeah,
no.
and you see the interactions with the wife at home as well, and you kind of alternate between kind of feeling sorry for him and feeling sorry for the wife, and then going, Jesus, would you ever tell her to shut up? She's a bitch. And then you kind of go, well, okay, she's got like, you know, mental problems as well. He's trying to do his best by his wife and stand up guy insofar as he's looking after his wife, even though he's getting such a slagging over.
He is a stand-up guy, and he's character arc as well. Whereas near the end, because there's a bit where the captain is with him, like saying, "Oh, I don't trust the cop that doesn't curse, and you're fucking not a real cop because you're just behind your desk and stuff." And then the captain says to him, "How are you getting?" And he goes, "Fuck you very much, Captain." You know what? Where you kind of go, you don't know if he's going to stay on if he's, because he stands up towards the wife and all that. So it's nearly like. It's nearly like the two characters go in different kind of where defense is kind of going more into villain mode as the film progresses and losing realization of who he is, where Robert Duvall's character is kind of
coming
like
back to himself and such.
reawakening.
I am. I'm good at my job and all that.
Yeah, and standing up for himself. And if it wasn't for him, it was like defense's wife and kid would probably be dead.
Yeah.
With it, because that's where it was going, and he was calm, and you see how good a cop he is, like detective work and
being able to like kind of de-escalate a situation just by throwing a few random questions, and then of course you see his own tragic life, you know, losing a child and all the rest. So I'm definitely going with Falling Down.
I think Falling Down for the acting, and that's
overall acting, because as I said, you can't take acting away from Robert De Niro. It's a phenomenal fucking performance from him.
But it is, you have to kind of put everyone together in it. So on to the next one, dialogue, storytelling and context. Now, I think we kind of covered it already with the plot and even with the acting. I think I'd give it the Falling Down as well. I think that the dialogue and well, the thing again, it's more of a monologue really with Taxi Driver.
And there's a few quotable, you know, when he's looking in the mirror, he's like, "You talking to me? You talking to me?"
But it is all him, his thoughts, and it's like the thoughts of someone descending into madness and stuff. So it is that. Whereas like, so I don't think you can call it's not dialogue because. And even when he's talking to people, it's like he's not really listening to them. Anyway,
it's his internal thoughts kind of, you know, verbalised, I suppose.
And like with Falling Down, there is like even with the whole thing with Mr. Kim at the start, where there is that they're talking between each other, and like your man Kim is like, this guy's quite obviously insane, you know, especially when he's going like, batteries, how much are the batteries, and he's like, smash it, you know, because the prices are up, and it's not like this guy is fucking just, but that's what Michael Douglas's character thinks. And then the whole thing where he's talking, where he has that well, not realisation, where he's confronted with the Nazi guy who's like, we're the same.
We're the same,
yeah. And the Nazi guy basically spills it out, where he's like, "Oh yeah, I heard about you," and he gives him a fucking bazooka, and he's like, "Oh," pretty much like, "Oh, I want you to kind of
continue killing gangs and all the rest."
Because that's what he thinks he's doing, going around killing minorities and stuff. And then Robert Duvall is, you know, there was a lot going on in Falling Down, a lot more than what the first time you'd look at it, that you'd pick up on. There's a
lot of commentary and a lot of holding up a mirror, I think, as well, you know, to yourself as well, depending on who you root for or what way you take it or what way you look at things.
Well, even the thing, Michael Douglas might necessarily be the main character because it's called Falling Down, and the whole thing where Robert Duvall is moving with his wife is to, I don't know what state it was, but a place where they're after moving London Bridge the wife keeps singing Falling Down, London Bridge is falling down, so you could easily have it all framed from his point of view, where it's just a.
And there's an awful lot of the film is dedicated to that. It's him in the station, it's him and his relationship with his work colleague as well, you know, and start interacting with the guys and his relationship with his wife and meeting, you know, sort of defenses. What, you know, he carries like probably a good half of the film as well.
And from defense's point of view, it's like society is falling down, it's collapsing, everything is collapsing, and it's like, oh, good wholesome American ways and values, the same shit that you hear people coming out with nowadays. It's never changed. In the 50s, I'm sure people were fucking rambling on about, the good old days of the 30s when people
the
were
American dream,
throwing themselves out of fucking window, you know, kind of like, the good old oppression with it. But so I'm going to have to. I think Falling Down gets it again, just surely on because or purely on the whole fact that there is actual dialogue going on between characters.
But rather than monologue.
I know that's like a weird technicality.
Yeah.
But as well, I don't know. I think it's just maybe it's in the 70s. Like this, I don't know. It's like it's more poetic. I'll give kind of Taxi Driver.
Yeah, I mean, again, you have it framed for like, you know, there's this whole sort of a device of like reading the letter that has been sent. You know, when Jodie Foster is rescued and she goes home, he gets a letter from the parents thanking him for like returning their daughter to him and all the rest. So I think things like that are, you know, and you can hear somebody like the monologue, I should say, reading it out. It sounds like somebody reading out a letter as well. You know, they had that whole thing of like, dear mom and dad, greetings from, you know, and it's, I don't know, I thought a lot of it was quite effective as regards that. You know, when you have the politician as well with these politicians' rhetoric and all this kind of stuff, you know, I do think that kind of stuff was pretty cool. But anyway.
Well, I do, yeah. But so, who would you give it to then for storytelling? Would you say storytelling rather more so than dialogue?
I suppose there's probably more twists and turns in Taxi Driver.
Yeah.
For it to be able to be carried through, I think maybe there.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I'll give it, because like Falling Down would say is like a pretty straightforward movie in a certain kind of sense, whereas Taxi Driver, yeah, we'll give it to Taxi Driver. Now, cinematography.
Well, as I said, there's numerous instances throughout Taxi Driver where I was actually almost taken out of the film and just thought, wow, that's a beautiful shot. Wow, that's a great shot. Oh my God, that's a great shot. Even simple things like when he was driving around and there's like sort of street lights being reflected in windows, and you know, you see sort of the hustle and bustle of, you know, you go from the presidential campaign to this seedy fucking place where there's like people sitting on the ground begging and prostitutes getting better around the place and all the rest. But it's all just framed beautifully and just gives this whole picture of New York.
For something shot in the night, I think it probably does capture what New York was like at the time really, really well. Like, there's loads of kind of the, say, midnight movies or fucking grindhouse movies that did the same, but there is something about Taxi because like it's kind of beautiful at the same time. And you can really see, I think you can see the evolution of fucking Scorsese as a director with it. Like, I mean, there's a reason why it's watchable. If it was done by another director with the same pacing to it, I think you'd be like, oh, fuck this guy. Like,
I think it'd be a lot duller as well, but I do think probably the silent star of the film alongside Robert De Niro is probably the cinematography for me anyway. As I said, there was numerous times where I was kind of like, that's, if you just had a still of that, that's fucking beautiful in itself, like, you know.
Now, that's not I think the cinematography in Falling Down is brilliant as well.
Yeah, like, absolutely. It gives that whole kind of shimmery heat of LA.
You feel hot looking at it. You feel hot and sticky looking at it. Even the bit where they go into the army surplus store and there's two lads in there that are shopping, and whatever, I can remember looking at it, they look uncomfortably hot.
Yeah, hot and sweaty. And
everyone
sticky.
just looks uncomfortable. Reminds me of Predator 2, you know, because there's that
jungle sweat.
Yeah. Where they were Predator 2. Was it LA? I think was set in as well. But you know, there was that just where it was set on was the hottest day of the year.
Yeah. And of course, you know, sort of that's the whole kind of trope as well. Like, people always go a little bit doolally in the heat, you know.
And as well, what people probably, if you're compared, like, obviously kind of say Taxi Driver probably considered more high art with stuff, whereas like with Falling Down, I think Falling Down might have been the first to do a lot of stuff, like, you know, when it followed the missile when he fires it accidentally underground, like, I'm sure that shot has been used by like Michael Bay and probably in a lot of action movies since that tracking motion, and there's a lot of like zoom in close-ups of people, you know, that nearly reminiscent of Jaws. Obviously not Jaws. Fucking what was the character's name? Roy Schneider's character's name in Jaws? I can't remember.
Fucking Captain something.
Captain Bill.
Possibly.
But that famous shot. You know, there's a lot of very cinematic things. Like, I think Michael Schumacher is amazing. I loved Lost Boys is probably my favourite film of all time. And there's a reason for it. Like, it's kinetic, and Falling Down, that's what makes Falling Down, I think, way more entertaining. Is the way it's shot and the style of it. Even like the bit where when the guy, the racist guy, is trying to handcuff Michael Douglas's character, and he's on the ground and he keeps zooming in on your man's lips going, give it to me, give it to me, give it to me, give it to me. You know, all that. There's just a lot of, whereas it could have been just one shot from the back, which would have been really, but like there was just a lot of energy going between the two of them, where you're like, oh my God, and builds the tension.
Feels so tense.
And then it's like he gets stabbed, and then there's that quietness and Like,
The stillness
and he's
after.
like, that's not my knife. But yeah, I suppose we're going to look like...
You see, that's the thing. They're two very different cities as
Yeah.
well. And I think for each of the film, Taxi Driver, absolutely. Well, not that I would know what New York in the 70s is like, but for me, like what I know of sort of tropes in the cinema, that absolutely portrays it in a very beautiful way.
Well, I think even weather-wise, we can probably associate with New York weather more than LA weather, because like the hottest it gets here,
25, 28 degrees
Yeah.
Celsius.
yeah, and like most of the time, so you're looking like average of 14 degrees really, and a lot of time even if it's
Not
16,
even, it's like
16 we're
9.
like, oh my god, we're going to melt.
Yeah.
Whereas like LA, like what you're talking
Yeah.
probably into the
It's
fucking-
just fucking hot sunshine. But yeah, like that's the thing, and they're two very, very different films, and they both capture the city that they're shot in perfectly. Like
Yeah.
as I said, you get the seedy nightlife of New York, and you get the absolute fucking hot, clammy, sticky sweat of LA. Like.
Yeah, and you get the feeling that LA is a city that's alive and vibrant and very multicultural and diverse in a good way. Like, you know, it's just portraying LA the way that, whereas New York, it's just it's like fucking Superman versus Batman. I mean, you know,
Yeah,
it's
I
like
suppose,
Gotham
yeah.
City versus
Metropolis.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I
Who are
suppose
we giving it to?
we're gonna have to give it to Taxi Driver.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like people might murder us.
Yeah, Scorsese will be after you.
Editing, pace, and effects. I'm gonna have to get. For me, it's falling down.
Yeah, in fairness. I mean, like, if we're talking about pace and effects and all the rest, there's not that much. You can't say much for special effects in Taxi Driver. There's not.
No,
It's
it's like there's the
more
gore
a
bits,
character,
yeah.
dialogue-driven film.
But even with the say some of the cinematography effects, they're like, I mean, all right, it's the 70s, but there's some of that kind of fading, you know, over kind of lace. Where some bits remind me of Suspiria with the lighting, but I don't know. You can see some of these things that turn into things that he masters later on with Goodfellas or with The Passion of the Christ, and you know where he becomes a more skilled director,
Brilliant,
whereas like
yeah.
this is very much the start where it's more gritty. I suppose a nearly documentarian kind of
Yeah.
style shot with elements of kind of that. Whereas I don't know. I think falling down, the editing is brilliant in it.
Well, as well, even from the point of view of like you are following 2, if not 3 different narratives. You're following him from Defense's what's happening to him in his perspective. You're following him from Robert Duvall, what he's up to in his perspective, and you're following from the ex-wife as well. And they all cut together seamlessly. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
you don't feel like, Jesus, when it jumps back in, you're like, oh shit, where were we with that? No, God, like, I can't remember, you know, why are we talking about this guy now? It all intercuts very, very seamlessly.
It does, and it's a point because as well, it's like with Falling Down, it's like unraveling kind of like the real story of this guy, like he's passed, and it all happens at the proper time. You know, it unfolds masterfully with it, where you do kind of like everyone would have to come to the conclusion at one point where it's like, well, this guy is fucking, he's a bad man.
Motherfucker.
Yeah, with it, but as well, it's just like I was saying, even with the kinetic kind of style.
Yeah,
that
it's
Joel
just it's
Schumacher-
faster moving, I think,
Yeah.
faster paced. And
And
I suppose from today's perspective as well, Taxi Driver is very slow moving.
Oh my god, yeah!
Very slow
Like
moving.
the two of us ended up raising their phones in the middle of Taxi
Yeah,
Driver.
there are a few points alright where it's very, very slow.
Yeah.
And like I know it was meant to like sort of build tension or build the monotony or look at how fucking shit my life is, where he's just sitting in his own apartment staring at the telly until he eventually kicks it over backwards really slowly. But I don't know, it's just it's a little bit too slow for
It's
sort
a
of
little-
modern tastes. I
It's
suppose.
paced a bit badly, like, you know. See, this is the thing as well, because Taxi Driver is seen as one of the greatest movies of all time.
It's a
which
slow,
it
but
is.
it's a slow burn. That's the thing.
Yeah.
It's whether you're in the humour for a slow burn
Yeah.
or for something that's like, here we go,
Yeah.
let's go, crack
But
on.
you know, I think there are certain aspects of, say, people that kind of criticise films or review movies where, do you know, there's any sacred cows?
Yeah.
And it's like, if you turn around and say, oh, look, I prefer the Karate Kid to fucking Citizen Kane or the Godfather, there's nothing wrong with that.
That's your preference.
That's it, and like in a lot of ways, the Karate Kid is better than somebody. No, and there's like a lot of B movies or what
Well, if
people
you
consider
offer
B
me the
movies.
choice to watch Karate Kid or Citizen Kane, I would plump for the Karate Kid every time.
You know, but it's like these people that consider them cinephiles.
Yeah.
Whereas that's where Quentin Tarantino was great. When Quentin Tarantino came to fucking kind of like prominence with things. And then he had his voice out there, and it was like, oh, this guy loves all these B movies and all that. And then all these people that were cinephiles started going, oh, well, yeah, I suppose Lady Snowblood and, you know, fucking The King of Fighters and all these were Street Fighter.
They're exploitation films.
They're good.
Should have been fucking sneered at.
Yeah, whereas, they would have been sneered at. And only for it was Tarantino. Like, if Tarantino was saying this shit when he was working in the video store, people would be like, shut the fuck up, what do you know?
Yeah.
And then he did Pulp Fiction, and they were like, oh, this guy
my
is...
God, yes.
With it, and it's... So, you know, you have to be honest about things. There's no point.
It's again, I mean, go back to one of your heroes, Rob Zombie. Like, everyone shat all over him for his, like, you know, Halloween and stuff like that. But
it's a great movie.
He's a horror fan himself. It was a House with a Thousand Corpses and all the rest. Again, people are like, oh, it's disgusting, violent.
That's
horrible.
another great film as well.
But that's it. But it's like, I mean, I would think it's brilliant. I would prefer sitting down watching that to fucking, I don't know, Sense and Sensibility or something like that. But that's not to say that somebody who would prefer Sense and Sensibility, they can't have that preference.
Well, it's like, I was saying it when fucking the Lords of Salem came out. Now, I guarantee it is a bit of a mess because people died in the making of it because they were fucking old. So he had to change a lot, and there was a lot of stuff went on in it. So it kind of went. But some of the shots in that, if that was a Stanley Kubrick movie, especially near the end, there was a lot of shots in it which they're very Kubrickian, if that's a term.
That's a term, yeah.
People would be fucking creaming themselves for it, or if it was an Italian director did it. But because it was someone called Rob Zombie, they were like,
who
this
came from,
movie's
you know,
a
sort of metally MTV kind of scene.
This movie's a piece of shit. And it's the movie's very similar, I think, in parts to Rosemary's Baby. Better probably than Rosemary's Baby. I think Rosemary's Baby isn't a good movie.
But again, you see, you have that whole thing of like, okay, right, people will revere such and such a film because of who's in it or who did it and all the rest. But then for somebody else, like, no, discard that.
Yeah,
you know, and I think a lot of it would be with Joel Schumacher with Falling Down. A lot of people like, he did Batman. He does all this fucking stupid, you know, whiz bang fucking action films and all the rest. But Falling Down, I think, is very. It's not placing anyone in. It's holding up a mirror, I suppose, to LA, and it's not passing any commentary on who is good and who is bad and what the right way to think is. It's just going...
Yeah, it does never portrays the gangbangers as bad, and as well it kind of brings in the whole thing that their family are there, so all of a sudden you're like,
these
people who died, they have family members who were upset, you know...
Yeah, and you kind of go, Jesus, they're only kids as well, because, you know, your one brings their mother to the station, and it suddenly makes everything very real, and it's like, well, it's all situational what ends up happening. And again, it's the whole point of Falling Down. It's like, okay, this guy was a bit unbalanced to begin with, but fucking his ex-wife and his kid, he doesn't get to see him, and he's having the day from hell, and that's what tips him over, you know.
But it's, and as well, I think Falling Down holds up more so. Like, people will always consider Taxi Driver to be a masterpiece because they've been told that it is, and it was. But I think Falling Down to a certain degree predicted and was very, very good at maybe unintentionally predicted the way, like, the world is fucking. There's a lot of guys now like Michael Douglas's character walking around, like, you have the incel movement, you have all these, I can't think of the
Proud Boys and all
the Proud Boys and all that,
but that's the thing, you have a lot of people that are sort of they're fuming at their life in general, and it's like, you know, who's to blame kind of a thing, and it's not necessarily any one fucking sector of society is to blame, it's the system is to fucking blame.
The system is to blame, but then instead of blaming the system, they blame...
Exactly. People are divided and fucking fighting against each other.
But we're getting away from for the editing, Falling Down. Soundtrack, sound design and film score.
Now, I suppose it's something he commented on a few times with Taxi Driver, insofar as they did have the recurring, and it was a very sort of a, not dreary, but you know what I mean, it's a very minor tone, kind of a very depressing.
It's nearly like a French
drone
horn or something, but I don't think it is. I don't know. It was Elmer Bernstein's last film score. He died, I think, just after writing this. So it's... I could talk all day about Elmer Bernstein.
Yeah, no point doing that, but like, I do think it's like, it gives this sense of the repetitiveness, the same thing every night, and it's this drone kind of thing. And I think that kind of it plays into his early character in itself, you know. Yeah, it did. Like, I mean, I think Taxi Driver hands down for the soundtrack. Like, I can't even remember the music from Falling Down. Now, some might say that's a marker of good soundtrack that you don't actually notice or it doesn't take. But I think that's what it was designed to do. It like that, because Joel Schumacher, like, you compare Lost Boys, where the soundtrack is nearly like a character in the movie itself. Yeah, and the soundtrack is as well known, or was as well known as the movie at the time. But I suppose that you couldn't really have
fucking like
Cheery.
AC/DC.
Yeah,
kind of,
exactly.
then you'd be
Cheery
like,
radio rock.
yeah. And
You
you're
don't want
like,
to be glorifying anyone's actions, kind of a thing. Yeah. But
when
no,
he's beating up the poor Chinese or Korean guy, like you know,
Vietnamese, I think he's Vietnamese.
No, he's Korean.
Is he?
Because
Oh,
he starts talking about Korea. Because remember, I ended up going
Korean
because
War,
I was
yeah.
like, oh yeah, what was the Korean
Sorry,
War
there's
all
me
about?
just being terribly racist there as well.
So I think with that one has to be Taxi Driver
for the
because it's
soundtrack,
just directing. This is going to be vision and execution.
I'm probably initially I'm going to go with Scorsese, but I'm sure if you want to try and persuade me towards
I can't really, can I? Like, I mean, the thing is, I think it's well directed, Falling Down, but you can't. No one's going to be talking.
That's what I was going to say. You're not like, I mean, Taxi Driver, as I said, was on my syllabus when I went to college. You're not going to get fallen down really on the syllabus going to college.
Like, I mean, I think Falling Down is aged an awful lot better, but that's because
It's
I think
slightly more modern.
Yeah, and I think Joel Schumacher was probably ahead of himself with, like, Joel, I could be wrong on this, but I think Joel Schumacher did music videos, and it was the same with Michael Bay and all that. That's why there was a lot of hatred towards, and people going into, Ridley Scott was hated when he went into movie making at first, because he was, like, coming from the world of advertising.
Yeah.
So you had this snobbery there with some, especially what would, like, Martin Scorsese would have been seen as an indie movie director. I'm not saying he would have had any, like, looking down his nose on these people, but you would have had a certain kind of industry mindset where it's like, well, these guys are coming in and they're like, there was Michael Bay got it for years where it's like, oh, he's editing inside his fast paced fucking thing, and it's
but I mean, that's sort of, I think there's a skill to even being able to tell a story in like 3 minutes in a fucking music video, or like 30 seconds in an advert. You have to be able to pack it all in.
There's nothing wrong with having a bit of style to it. I think a lot of ways, like
style,
at the moment, Marvel is gone.
It's
backwards.
too whiz bang, yeah.
But it's not even whiz bang. There's no style to it. There's no substance to some
That's
of the
what I mean.
movies,
It's just it's too much close up battles that you can't actually see what the fuck is going on.
It's just showing
effects,
things, Like, whereas at least with Michael Bay stuff, there's stylistic things
there's
there.
like cool explosions.
Yeah, and it's just, there's just certain things. But like, I mean, I think Schumacher would have been, especially with the 80s directors, where there was that thing. It's like injecting energy into it. Where the 70s nearly fucking slowed things down.
It was slow, it was storytelling, it was paced, it was like almost theatrical, as in stage theatrical rather than cinema theatrical.
And they kind of brought like cinema as being a legitimate art, and as well outside of the Hollywood system, where it wasn't just like these, nearly like what fucking if you compare DC comics in the 60s to when Marvel came along, whereas like Marvel started throwing in all this action and these kind of like, weird poses where it's showing people in the middle, whereas like a lot of DC stuff would just have Batman standing still going, hey there, Joker, you stop that. And then all of a sudden you had this fucking kinetic movement of like, fucking Kirby like drawing like the Hulk punching through a panel in someone else. And I think that's really the difference between, say, Scorsese and Schumacher with that. And Schumacher, I think, was one of those people that laid down the pathway for modern directors. And now it kind of seems to have gone. Sam Raimi, I think, is very underrated with that. Like, Sam Raimi fucking loads of energy
the crash
directing.
with Zoom fucking, crash shots and all the rest,
But I suppose you have to give it to Scorsese.
Yeah, absolutely,
really.
for Taxi Driver. I mean, it's everyone will have heard of Taxi Driver, everyone, whereas a lot of people say Falling Down and that.
But as well, Scorsese with it, like, it probably took a lot more balls, and as well, like, I don't think Schumacher kind of broke the mold on his directing. He was like an established director at the time, and he kind of like, it's directed excellently. It's directed by someone who's an amazing director at the time. Scorsese still very young, and he was like experimenting and trying to get things. So he was like, he was like creating the mold. For things, he was like laying down a lot of things that people
and as well, I mean, it would have been one of the first sort of like post-war films as such, insofar as like dealing with
I think the Vietnam War would have still been going on at that time.
That's what I mean, because you had the whole slew of like Platoon and Apocalypse Now and all that kind of stuff that came afterwards. And I think that was probably the first one that dealt with like soldiers coming back from war or something.
PTSD,
like,
it would have been obviously a good bit before Deer Hunter. But it's, it was telling a fucking story that was like that.
Was going to end up becoming very common, I think.
Yeah, and as well, it was stuff that was affecting people. I can't think of the word, but it was very much of its time. Well, not that like it isn't of its time now, but it was covering topic. I don't know. Well, yeah.
Zeitgeist?
Yeah, he gets the point. Congratulations, Scorsese. Go home. You got the point.
So how are we fixed now anyway before we go to our final one? So
Falling Down is
1,
on
2, 3,
4.
4.
And
1, 2,
Taxi
3,
Driver is
4.
on 5.
Whoa, this one could be now.
I think it's going to be a draw because, being honest, for the it factor and one of a kind, I think I'd give it to Falling Down.
Now, if we're doing one of a kind and transcendent, you're probably going to have to give it to like Taxi Driver. But the it factor is in like entertaining. You'd watch it again.
Yeah.
I think Falling Down is that film.
Yeah, that's where I'm looking at it from. Where there's something about Falling Down. It's like, what were the movies that were on about? Like Maximum Overdrive compared to Christine. Christine is better directed. There's a lot more going for it and stuff. But there's just something about Maximum Overdrive.
It's just more entertaining. I think. Yeah, the it factor.
And I think it's the same with this. Whereas if someone put down the 2 fucking Blu-rays in front of me and they're like, right,
pick one.
Yeah. And one that you're only going to be looking at for the rest of you.
Desert Island Disc, yeah. Falling Down is more entertaining. I'll be able to watch that more often.
Yeah, I think the whole thing with like, and as well, it's probably because we're at the age we're in our 40s now, so probably would have been a teenager when I saw, well, probably before as a teenager, probably saw Taxi Driver, but too
Didn't
young to
resonate
comprehend.
with you, yeah.
And then seeing it as a teenager, loved it. When I started getting into cinema and appreciating cinema, I was like, oh my god! And then you look at it again, and then looking at it in your 20s, it was like, and then 30s, it's like, you know what? Then I want to look at Survivor or Project Runway or so, you know, I'm not in the mood for it. And now when we were looking at it again, I was like, yeah, I can appreciate it, but I just don't want to look at it.
It's a very worthy film, I suppose. Yeah, whereas Falling Down is a bit more entertaining, I suppose.
Yes. I think there's actually more layers to Falling Down as well.
I suppose it addresses more of a cross section of society. Yeah, really, I suppose.
But the whole thing with Falling Down, you look at Falling Down the first time and you can walk away from it going, that was an entertaining film, that was a good film. And then if you look at the second time, you kind of go,
the commentary and
then you start looking into Duval's character, the wife. Barbara Hershey is amazing in this as well. She's very believable. And I kind of felt sorry for Barbara Hershey because people who aren't familiar with her, they might be familiar with the film The Entity. That's where she plays a woman who's been physically, sexually and emotionally abused by a demon in her house, and it's fucking it's a great fucking movie, but like she gets like horrendously tortured in that movie. And like the finishing lines to it is when she goes back to the house, do you think that like, oh, they're after getting rid of the demon, the door slams behind her and it goes, welcome home, cunt. And you're just like, oh god, and something comes up saying, oh yeah, up to the day that she died or whatever, she was tormented. You just go, fucking hell, this is
very depressing.
Yeah. So you kind of go, Jesus, like she went from a relationship with a demon to marrying Michael Douglas.
And as well, I suppose there is the side commentary of Robert Duvall's wife. There's this whole thing of like, oh well, she was a beauty when she was younger, and now that she's middle aged, she's kind of dealing with losing her looks and what else is there. And like your one that actually played her, she was a model like back in the day.
60s or something, and so I just give it Falling Down.
Yeah, go on then.
So it's a draw.
After all that,
it's a draw. But I think we made some. Like, I find the two were so close with things. They're from different eras. There's probably 20 years between the two of them.
Yeah.
93 for Falling Down, 76 for Taxi Driver. So
25 odd.
20 years. You know, it's a different. Like a lot happened with cinema from the 70s. There was a big jump from 70s to the 80s, and then like the 80s was the birth of the blockbuster and action movies, really. And then like into the 90s, it was like. Movies started becoming a little bit more, I don't know.
What's the word you're looking for?
Smooth is all I had. I don't know. But yeah.
Slick.
So slick, yeah. So look, it's a draw.
Yes.
Yeah, if you disagree, or if you think one should have won over the other, leave a comment, let us know. Give us a thumbs up. Or whatever. Yeah. You know, I fucking hate saying these things.
I know, yeah.
Shouldn't be saying it. Like, people aren't fucking morons. Why are you saying it? You're only saying it because you're fucking after being brainwashed. Listen to other people saying things.
Yeah, that's it. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't.
Yeah, but maybe you need a reminder every now and then.
That's true.
Give us a good review. Yeah. Send us your money.
You looking at me? Yeah. You talking to me?
Buy your food from Go Fresh.
We don't have any sponsorship. You wish.
Yeah, if you get the thing from Go Fresh and it fucking does. Actually, that's it wasn't Go. It was a different food thing. We tried it for fucking one of those things for a while. Hello Fresh, yeah. We got it, and the portions were fucking dreadful.
Bear in mind, you're a monster, though.
It wasn't even that. They gave one potato, Laura,
That's
to make
true,
fucking
suppose,
chips between two people. One fucking potato.
But see, that probably just shows us what our Western diet is. That's why we're all so like obese and stuff.
Fucking one potato between two people, and they show you on the thing where it's like a plate full of fries, and it's like, how can this potato that's like 1/8 of the size of the fucking plate?
Two plates of yes, true, I suppose, yeah.
Well,
teach your portion control, though.
So that's a kind of like we could do a thing, walk in and shoot up the
any of these food delivery services. Okay.
But yeah, so fuck them, fuck all of them, unless at some stage this podcast takes off and we get sponsored by them. Then we're going to have to come back and edit this, and we can't. We're
take it
like,
down.
I love the taste of Go Fresh.
Yes, any of those.
But yes, look, thank you for listening if you made it this far. So until next week,
go shoot up your